If your power went out tonight for a full week, would you be ready for it? Because in the last few years, millions of people found out they were not.
Most people just do not realize, how dependent they are.
Yet when you hear the word prepper, you might picture
people all over America are stocking extensive amounts of food, water, expecting that at any moment a devastating disaster will strike.
a lot of that. The kind of stuff that makes for great reality TV, but is mostly laughed at by the general population. But in recent years, something has shifted. We have lived through a pandemic, severe weather, empty gas stations, entire cities losing power for days. And now, being prepared doesn't sound extreme anymore, it just sounds smart. So in this episode, we are hearing from a real-life prepper who's breaking down the top essential items that you need to have before the next emergency hits, and the one that some preppers don't even think about. Spoiler alert, it's not toilet paper. Before I even get started, is it okay to refer to you as a prepper?
I 100% identify with it. I know in the past it's kind of a loaded phrase.
You were a prepper or something? Survivalist.
But it's a big tent and it's an expanding community.
A big tent. That's a good way to put it. Because when you look at Kris, founder of the YouTube channel City Prepping, and the other people in his community, it's not who you'd picture from the National Geographic special. Data shows there are roughly 23 million self-identified preppers in the US, a number that has grown significantly over the last decade to represent about 9% of adults. And if you don't identify as one, stick around to the end of the episode. You might feel differently. You see, the word prepper used to be fringe, but then there was a global life event.
Prior to 2020, I didn't really tell anybody about the channel. COVID hits, and a lot of people came to the channel and were like, well, what do we do? How do we prepare? I had a video that was really popular about building a 2-week food supply. And so I saw it become more mainstream at that point.
COVID was the alarm that woke up a lot of people, but what kept them awake was everything that came after. Supply chain issues, longer power outages, dozens of severe weather events, and through it all, this growing awareness that the systems we've always relied on are under more pressure than most of us realized. In 2024, less than 6 out of 10 Americans were prepping their homes. Now it's more like 8 in 10, because once you've had that wake-up call, it's hard to go back to sleep without thinking about what else you are not ready for.
And a phrase that we're using more on our channel that seems to be resonating with our community is how to build margin, how to give yourself a buffer for these things that are rapidly changing.
A buffer, not a bunker. Holy. That's the shift right there. But while more Americans are thinking about preparedness, research shows that only 5% of them are actually ready for an emergency. Think of your 4 closest friends, and now imagine only one of you has the tools to withstand a major power outage. It's not a great picture. So how do we create that buffer?
We have a rule in the preparedness community. Basically, the rules of 3. You can't survive 3 minutes without oxygen, speaking about breathing, 3 days without water, and then 3 weeks without food.
Yes, the essential basic human needs. That makes sense. But in our current world, power also touches everything.
Can you live without it? Obviously, but it makes life so much simpler and so much easier. You get communication, like I said earlier, refrigeration with your food. So many elements that are important within our community, so many core foundations are all touched by electricity one way or the other.
Blackouts are happening 20% more often now than they did a decade ago, and they're expected to become more and more common. Not having power isn't just an inconvenience or missing your favorite Netflix show. You're losing access to refrigeration, communication, temperature control, important medical devices, maybe even something so basic it's not top of mind. If the grid went down for 7 days starting tomorrow, what do you think most American households would regret not having?
Water for sure.
Without power, everything else starts to fall apart. And here's what many people don't realize. Not every outage is an accident. Many are planned.
Last year, for example, when the wildfires hit LA, in our area, we're only an hour away from Los Angeles. So they preemptively shut the grid down because the winds were so high. They didn't want anything to catch on fire out here. So it's becoming more common to have that need for backup power than probably most people realize.
Utilities often shut off power on purpose to try to prevent disaster. So it's not even about being prepared for when disaster strikes, it's about being prepared, period.
The more research we do, the more we realize how vulnerable, I guess, we are right now, our grid. And that margin that our grid used to have is beginning to shrink more and more, where something cataclysmic could happen very easily.
It might sound extreme, but Kris is right. We have an aging power infrastructure struggling with rising electricity demand from AI data centers and electrification, and meanwhile, the supply side is scrambling to keep up. We can't always rely on our utilities or our government to keep our devices up and running, and that fact is what caused a major shift in the prepper community. You see, for a long time, preppers didn't like solar. Why?
There was a how should I put this, a very strong political element to the preparedness community for years. And in that particular political position, for whatever reason, solar was seen as a threat, and they kind of saw that as maybe the other side is into that. So I think it was, kind of a turnoff for some people.
But Kris never looked at it that way. He saw solar for what it really is, a practical tool.
I just look at it from the sheer just ease of use. You can, stand it up if there's a disaster, set up solar panels and a battery system with an inverter. You're not reliant on fuel that's limited. It produces no noise, no fumes. And so if you're concerned about drawing attention to yourself after an emergency by firing up a generator, you don't have to deal with that.
Solar products make the most sense for a community built around self-sufficiency. Kris made his first video about a solar generator 8 years ago, and it went viral. It just took a while for the stereotypes and the politics to catch up to the logic, but catch up, they did.
It seemed to resonate with a lot of people in our community as far as from a practical, long-term potential grid down situation where you're not having to stand around the pump for fuel and be vulnerable in that way.
Indeed, solar is truly bipartisan. We even have a whole episode about it. But here's where I really want you to pay attention, because it's not just about preparedness, but practicality. Let's look at Kris's life. He lives in California, where fuel and energy are really expensive and rates climb even higher during peak demand hours. That makes solar and storage a very smart money move.
From a practical perspective, the ROI in our area at least is maybe 4.5 years for a battery and solar system. And then you've got a long runway after that where some of these systems can last 10 years plus, where it just is producing free at that point.
His system paid for itself in less than 5 years and now can run his place completely free. Kris saw battery storage as a great investment beyond preparedness, and a lot of homeowners are catching on. In fact, Energy Sage Marketplace data shows that cost savings is the #1 reason homeowners are installing a battery. But to be clear, we're not talking about going totally off-grid quite yet. Even Kris's house is technically still grid-tied, although he certainly has enough solar and storage he could go off-grid if he needed to.
This house has been off-grid for about a month now without touching the power or touching the grid. It just gives us an opportunity, kind of an experiment, to see how long things can be powered and what works, what doesn't.
But going fully off-grid is its own conversation, and Kris is honest about what that actually takes.
It definitely takes money. I'm not going to lie. If you really want to start building a system that can take you really off-grid.
He's right. According to Energy Sage data, it generally costs well over $100,000 to power the average size home off-grid. But don't let that scare you, because you don't have to go that far. A massive study of over 500,000 homes found that 63% of Americans can't afford enough backup power and solar and batteries to keep half of their essentials running during an outage. Half might not sound like much, but think about what you actually need in an emergency. Maybe keep your fridge running, charge your phone, power a medical device or a sump pump, keep your Wi-Fi online. Having just a home battery can do all of those things for you for days. And if you need to figure out the best home battery for your home's needs, I highly recommend checking out this video. But if you also have the solar panels to charge that battery, your battery can go much longer, allowing you to power even more appliances. At the end of the day, it's just about what works for you.
It just comes down to two things. What are your needs? What are your priorities? And how much are you willing to spend? Those two things dictate which direction you go.
Here's what surprised me the most talking to Kris. He doesn't frame any of this around fear. He doesn't talk about doomsday or an impending apocalypse. For him, it's about shielding himself from the very real emergencies that we find ourselves facing.
If there's any kind of earthquake or fires or anything, we can come here and, if the grid goes down, we don't have to worry about that. And if it's in the middle of the cold season or hot season, again, I've switched a lot of the climate control over to mini splits. And so those are incredibly efficient, and we can easily run those during the day or night. So I don't know, for me, it gives me a sense of security knowing again, with energy prices where they are right now, where they could potentially go if this war continues to escalate or in Iran. And so it's something that it's kind of taken me out of that realm of having to be concerned about all the variables I can't control. And it's given me a place of peace where I'm like, okay, I can control this, and I don't really have to worry about these issues.
That's not an extremist thing. It's what most of us want. A little bit more control and a lot more buffer between our families and whatever unexpected event comes next. The preparedness community figured this out years ago. The rest of us are just now catching up.
It's funny when I mention that I'm a prepper, people are like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to get into that. So it's not a fringe thing like I saw 6 years ago.
6 years ago, Kris didn't tell anyone he was a prepper. Today, people pull him aside at parties to ask for his advice. The world changed. changed, and the definition of prepping changed with it.
You are quite prepared.
The takeaway is pretty clear. You don't have to call yourself a prepper, but putting more effort into preparedness could give you more control over your life. And energy is one of the biggest levers you have. Whether it's rising electric bills, grid instability, or just peace of mind for emergency scenarios, solar and battery backup are worth looking at. If you want to explore what that looks like for your home, check out Energy Sage. You can compare real quotes and talk to a non-salesperson about your options, no pressure included. Big shout out to Kris for coming on this show. If you want to hear more of our conversation, stay tuned for his episode of Plugged In: The Full Conversation. Hit subscribe so that you get an alert for that. In the meantime, you can check out his YouTube channel, City Prepping. That's it from me, but now I want to hear from you. If your power went out tonight, would you be prepared? What's the one thing that you had wished that you had? Drop it in the comments and stay plugged in.